Hello and welcome. We begin with the latest from the West African nation of Nigeria, where anger against the Bola Tinubu government is simmering, and citizens are taking inspiration from ongoing protests in East Africa's Kenya and Uganda. The Nigerian government says the military will intervene to prevent any violence at protests by citizens. The military has warned the protests would head off anarchy. Now, this and the armed forces won't allow the nation to spiral out of control. Nigeria's police chief also warned against the protests, blaming self-appointed crusaders and influencers for igniting the protests. Nigerian citizens are mobilizing for protests from the 1st of August against bad governance and economic hardship. The government says these protests could turn violent as they were inspired by events in Kenya, where the youth took to the streets and forced the William Ruto government to scrap tax hikes. In a statement, President Bola Tinubu said that he does not want a Sudan-like situation in Nigeria. He said his government is not afraid of protests, but the damage it would cause to ordinary people. The Nigerian president also met with the traditional rulers to seek their help for countering protests. Earlier this week, Nigerian government held an emergency meeting in response to the nationwide protests. More than 40 cabinet ministers, including the National Security Advisor, attended the meeting. The government has sought more time to end economic hardships. Last week, the president agreed to more than double the monthly minimum wage for federal workers. The government also started delivering truckloads of rice to each state to ease the cost of living pressures. Economic troubles for Nigerian citizens rose exponentially since President Tinubu ended a costly fuel subsidy and liberalized the naira currency in reforms needed to revive the country's economy. Inflation in the country has risen to a 28-year high of 34.2% since the Tinubu government's reforms. The last major protest movement in Nigeria in October of 2020 began over abuses by the SARS anti-robbery police squad, and it grew into the largest anti-government demonstrations in Nigeria's modern history. The police unit was disbanded, but the protests ended in bloodshed. Youth-led protests against the government first started in Kenya, where the campaign is still on against William Ruto. It then inspired youth in Uganda to raise their voice against President Museveni. A crackdown on demonstrators is underway in Kampala too, and now Nigeria, where tensions are simmering as the D-Day approaches. So the youth in Africa clearly want a significant change in their political leadership. Will these protests inspire winds of change in other African nations too? For more on this, we have with us Dr. Chukwudiri Nwangwu, a political analyst and postdoctoral research fellow. He joins us live from Nsukka in Ngunu state of Nigeria. Thank you for being with us, Doctor.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Now, the Nigerian military have said that they will intervene if the protests erupt in Nigeria, saying that they would head off anarchy. What are your thoughts on this kind of a reaction by the authorities in Nigeria?
Okay. Well, in the first instance, the reaction from the Nigerian Military High Command, represented by its spokesperson, is a clear indication that the government of the day is more or less on a panic mode, given the impending protest that is expected to commence on 1st of August 2024. So the government is on a panic mode, and that in itself has made the military, which is largely a conservative state institution, to come out and make a pronouncement to the effect that if the protest turns violent, that it would intervene. But it is important to point out a few things here. One is that the military, based on extant constitutional provisions, does not have express right or powers rather, does not have express powers to intervene in civil matters or in domestic matters. The Constitution clearly recognizes that the military is the state institution empowered to ward off issues that border on external aggression, issues that threaten the integrity of the country, especially from the outside, not from within. Civil protest or social movement or civic movement, as is being planned out by a number of personalities, is purely a civil matter which ordinarily should elicit the intervention of the police. The police is the only organization or the institution of the state that is empowered to do so. So the military can only intervene on invitation of the president or his representatives to do so if the police and other paramilitary forces are overwhelmed. So it is not of the military to begin to tell the public or to threaten the protesters, the prospective protesters with an impending intervention.
Right. And Doctor, what are the main grievances that are driving the need for these nationwide protests in Nigeria, and what impact would these protests have on daily life, security, as well as the economy?
Okay, the protest is called the End Bad Governance Protest. It is also called the Days of Rage Protest in certain quarters. So in Nigeria, within the past 2 years or thereabouts of President Bola Tinubu's government, Nigeria has been characterized by a progressive increase of negative growth in all indices, in all known indices in all known economic indices. Whether we are talking about inflation, whether we are talking about cost of living, and so on and so forth, they have all been on the rise. Meanwhile, the purchasing power of an average Nigeria has been on the decline, or has rather been on a stagnant position. So given all of this, living in Nigeria has become increasingly more difficult within the past 1 year plus. So in the light of all this, which have also found expression in an environment that is characterized by the implementation of various kinds of neoliberal economic policies, like the removal of fuel subsidy, which was announced on 29th May 2023, that is the day the president was inaugurated. From the first subsidy removal to the floating of the local currency known as the naira, amongst other neoliberal policies, all these have further impoverished an average Nigerians. So the true position of things today is that there is hunger in the country, there is bad governance in the country, the standard of living has further worsened, and the cost of living has further increased, thereby making it extremely difficult for an average Nigeria to survive. It will that the minimum wage in Nigeria as of today is 18,000 naira. 18,000 naira, as a matter of fact, is difficult to sustain an average family beyond 1 week in the present economic situation in Nigeria as we have it today. So the key drivers of this policy, the key drivers of this impending protest are varied, but they are also cross-cutting. I've mentioned the issue of petroleum subsidy removal, which has further deepened the poverty in the land, the floating of the local currency, which has also made it difficult even for the benefits, the purported benefits of the first subsidy removal to accrue directly to the citizens. Then the high rate of inflation, the high rate of food inflation in the country, the public debt profile of the country, among several other economic issues, which have combined to deepen the poverty level in the country.
Yes. Yes. And Doctor, we know that the Nigerian government is keen to avoid the Kenya-style protests that have been ongoing for more than about 6 weeks. These protests being led by Gen Z. And like in Kenya, Tinubu is blaming an external influence for the unrest. What is your assessment of this?
It's quite unfortunate to hear that external elements are responsible for the impending protest. At least one of the persons who has made that comment is the former aide to former Vice President of Nigeria, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, Daniel Bwara. He insinuated in one of his television appearances that some external actors might be responsible for the impending protest. But the truth of the matter is that there is no basis for externalizing the causes within the country, within the domestic environment of Nigeria. There are 1,001 reasons that one can readily lay one's hands on regarding the, as per the justification for the imminent protest. So the idea of trying to externalize it, either by accusing opposition parties or Mr. Peter Obi of the former presidential candidate of the Labour Party, or indeed other political actors in the country, is more or less a misguided assertion. It's more like a drowning man who is just trying to lay his hand on a crutch, on a straw. But truth be said, within the country, people are dying every day on installment, largely because of their inability to meet their basic necessities of life. Within the country, kidnappers in the northwest, militancy in the south, especially the Niger Delta region, Boko Haram insurgency and the activities of the Islamic State in West Africa are still very much prevalent. These are critical issues of national concern that should elicit the genuine attention of the leaders, and not to begin to trade blame or do a buck passing exercise. It will not address the issue.
Right. Absolutely. Doctor, thank you very much for being with us on Firstpost Africa and for your valued insights and assessment.
All right. Thank you so very much.
Climate change is on our doorstep. It's time for a revolution to take root. And it starts with 1.4 billion Indians. It starts with one tree for humanity. One tree for Mother Earth. One tree for our future. Project One Tree, a News 18 network initiative.
Across continents, one powerful news source.
Bringing you diverse perspectives on the issues that matter.
We go beyond the boundaries to give you that little extra about every sporting moment. So thank you for making Firstpost 5 million strong. We're counting on your support, and you can trust us to bring you the news unfiltered and unvarnished. On the show today, the T20 World Cup bandwagon has moved across to the West Indies. What can you expect from this?
Hello, I'm Alison Green, coming to you from Durban, South Africa. Today we have a special show.
Start with a report on India's shifting nuclear posture. The first time since India officially became a nuclear power.
Hello and welcome to Firstpost America. I'm Eric Ham, coming to you live from the nation's capital, Washington, D.C.